Okay, so we are at Vala, and Anthony, I wanted to ask you about two of the wines we tasted today, Prima Donna and the Castana. And starting with the Prima Donna, you were talking about your history in making wines here on the farm and how that extends into the current wine. So wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about that.
When I was a boy and I lived on this farm, my job when we made wine was one of my jobs was to punch down the caps on the white wines that were fermented. We fermented all of the whites on their skins, and that was just a traditional way that our family did things from Piemonte. When we started this winery, we started out doing things the UC Davis way, and then working back towards these old traditions and in the way that I was taught to do things. So we now do complete skin contact on the Prima Donna. The way it works is that we harvest the grapes on different days, different sections of the vineyard, and we bring these in as separate batches. So they're fermented as separate batches. They then are put through ML separately. They then are aged on their lees separately for 12 to 18 months, normally 18 months. And then at the end of that time, we blend them together.
What are the characteristics you're picking up on La Prima Donna?
Do you mean flavors and aromas?
Yeah, I think the flavor profile, acidity, talk about the mouthfeel, whatever you'd like.
What we were hoping for with that wine is a wine that has what I call a round mouthfeel, but we wanted it to have a good crispness in the finish, so that you got a sense that it was somewhat plush, but at the same time very refreshing. We also wanted it to have some texture to it, and that comes naturally from the skin contact. But we have to be careful, because when you do a skin contact, especially with white, the grapes have to be very ripe, because you can get so many bad phenolics otherwise, and it's just not a good thing. There are a lot of skin contact wines out there. We're not particularly into orange wines. That we find that for us, the majority of them are not very elegant. And one of the things that we wanted to avoid was that harshness. And so we try to make the Prima Donna to be an elegant white wine.
Now the Castana, I was really impressed by, really fresh, ready to drink, although I did notice after we started drinking that it had been decanted for a couple hours at least, and I noticed in your tasting notes that you recommend quite a lengthy decanting process. Talk to us a little bit about that wine, what we're tasting in it. A lot of spice, great fruit, tremendous nose. Any thoughts on the Castana?
Well, that was just a little wine that what we do with our blends here is that the vineyard decides what is going into the wines. Occasionally, we have certain varieties that we accept and we see a great deal of losses on before we harvest them. And this is all part of the game, and we accept that. Occasionally, though, you have a year where you don't lose quite as many grapes. So we have two options. We just throw it into our normal blends, which are the Prima Donna, Silk, Mahogany, and Cedar. Or we say, well, to do that would throw off the normality of the previous vintages too much, so we'll separately vinify those extra grapes. And that's what we did with Castana. And in this case, it was mostly Barbera. And that was then blended with Petit Verdot, Carmine, Sagrantino, Lagrange, those sort of things. The other part was that when it came out of the fermenter, it was just extremely aromatic, extremely fruitful, and I said, this is different than what we normally experience, a bit like Silk, but even more cherries. And we thought it would be interesting to have that wine be in a small batch for early consumption. And so we wanted to go right to barrel, do ML in barrel for 3 months, all new oak, and then right out and into bottle. And that's how it ended up.
And it's very drinkable right now, but obviously some age worthiness the decanting process would be a must, you're saying? You keep it out a few hours before if you're drinking it now?
We basically recommend decanting all of our wines, even the whites. We find improve with a bit of opening, but especially the reds. And I think with our particular wines, it just does help.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thanks for talking with us.
It's my great pleasure.